What if all the control you've built to stay safe is the very thing keeping you small? The moment you loosen the grip, the world begins to open. Fear is the guardian at the doorway that leads to everything we want in life. It often tries to take the driver's seat under the guise of keeping us safe, but fear ends up steering us away from presence, trust, love, and flow. Control is the costume that fear wears. When we're living under the spirit of fear, we think we're choosing when we're actually reacting. And we're not even reacting to the present. We're usually still reacting to the past based on old reflexes that once helped us survive. Fear makes us want to control things in order to feel safe. But when we try to control life, everything becomes smaller. We become smaller. And yet, when we surrender into presence, life expands with us. In this episode, we'll explore how fear disguises itself as control over self, others, nature, time, and reality, and how it robs us of presence, trust, ease, flow, joy, love, creativity, decisiveness, light, and connection. We'll dig into the roots of biological and chronic fear, exploring how it's encoded into our nervous systems for survival. Yet when fear is part of our inheritance and becomes a chronic state, it collapses our energy, dims our light, and shuts our hearts out of truly living. Fear causes us to activate dimmer mode and play small. Fear stops us from discovering our essence and stepping into our authentic self. Fear tempts us to blend in, to do what others do in order to be accepted, to hide our vulnerability when we most want to be seen and connected. Fear convinces us not to take the leap toward everything we want in life, and it has a lot of plausible reasons that we could settle for. So if you're getting tired of any of the above, then stay tuned. We're going to explore how we can begin to unhook from fear's distortions and illusions so we can liberate our essence in light, remember who we are, activate the soul's purpose, and make the contribution to this world that we were born to carry out. This episode is the third portal in this 9-part mini-series on the emotional and behavioral anchors that weigh us down in life. We're going to explore fear through the lens of, what am I afraid will happen if I stay open? Why am I afraid to release the control that's keeping my heart walled off from life? Welcome to Inner Integration. I'm Meredith Miller, and this is Fear, the Phantom of Control. Let's begin by bringing fear out of the shadows, by naming the ghost that's been quietly shaping our thoughts, reactions, and decisions. Fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet whisper inside our choices, a sensation of tightness in the chest, a shallow breath, a subtle no to life's invitation. Fear collapses the auric field. It shuts down our access to higher states of consciousness. It blocks us from truly connecting with others. And when we perceive danger and threat everywhere, we then go into states of defense or denial. Fear causes us to run away from people, opportunities, money, love, connection, joy, and all of life's blessings, all the while thinking we're keeping ourselves safe. Fear is like a glass ceiling that arises at the edge of transformation. Fear reminds us of the past and everything that could go wrong. It robs us of creative surrender. It blocks us from the ability to open to love, and it destroys our faith in the mystery, the unseen, the miracles of life. Chronic fear isn't the same as biological fear. Biological fear is essential for survival. Our nervous systems are innately intelligent enough to fight, flee, freeze, or fawn when our life depends on it. Yet, as we've explored in this season of the podcast, those defensive states are meant to be temporary until the organism is away from the danger or life threat. Chronic fear is when the nervous system gets stuck in alarm mode. That leads to energy leakage, suppressed creativity, diminished trust, disconnection, exhaustion, and collapse. Intense fear that feels like a life threat causes immobilization and collapse. This is why so many people are living in shutdown or semi-shutdown modes, like the functional freeze state. Most of us have all kinds of chronic fears, though we may not always want to admit it. The fear of losing control and getting hurt, or hurting someone else. The fear of being truly seen and loved. The fear of being too much or not enough and getting rejected or punished. The fear of being alone in the world and having to do it all yourself. The fear of never actualizing our higher potential, soul calling, and raison d'être. Many of us can relate to being afraid of what might happen if we finally let go of our grip that makes everything seem under control. If we stop efforting so much. If we shift out of hyper self-reliance and instead allow the Creator to fill that space, co-creating with us. Would you like to know that the Creator of all that is has your back? And would you like to know what it's like to let go just enough to invite the Creator back in? And would you like to know that you're worthy of the Creator's assistance and that miracles are possible for you, that it's possible to create with much more ease and grace by simply allowing that space for God to enter? Fear creates confusion in the mind and static in the field. It blocks the connection with the divine. It blinds us from seeing the divine in all that is. One of my clients who struggled with feeling like something was wrong with her whole life brought in a beautiful new download from God to replace it. The new ancestral agreement she made was, there's nothing wrong with any creation of the Creator. That's a whole new level of trust in God. When things are good, it's easy to remember that. But when we're struggling or grappling with trying to control the chaos in our world and in our lives, it's easy to forget that everything is happening for a reason, and not because we deserve it. I don't believe in a punishing, wrathful God. I think that's a distortion created by some religions for control of people and society. We hear about wars, genocide, and destruction justified in the name of God. That's more likely to be an infection of the spirit of wrath. The Creator of all that is the frequency of unconditional love. When you're trying to tune into a channel on the radio, but you're not quite on the station you're looking for, the static is going to distort the experience of the music you want to hear. Most of us have forgotten how to access the divine frequency amidst all the distortions and distractions in our world. And perhaps none of that is a mistake. Maybe it's all there as contrast, to nudge us into remembrance, to turn back toward God. And maybe, just maybe, the oppression of fear is the loudest reminder that we've lost our way. Fear is like a ghost. It's invisible yet haunting. It's tricky to see, to name, to put your finger on it, but if you're still enough, you can see the effects it has in your life and environment. It's a lot easier to face the ghost when we aren't alone. When we feel separate from others, from nature, from our true self, from God, the fear is paralyzing. Fear often causes us to become defensive, which we explored in the previous episode as the armor we mistake for safety. And as I mentioned in other episodes, these emotional anchors can cause distortions in our life and relationships, layering upon one another, playing into one another. Each of us has certain anchors that are more prominent than others. For me, fear has always been at the core of everything. Fear can be challenging to break through. We tend to gravitate towards situations and people that keep us in the same patterns and loops. And when we feel the same resonance as painful past experiences, that triggers old fear and adds to the buildup of chronic fear, causing us to try to control life even more in order to alleviate the fear of the fear. It's like sinking into quicksand while desperately trying to get out. And control may temporarily relieve the fear, but the ghost keeps getting bigger, stronger, and louder. Control isn't the antidote to fear. Surrender is. And that doesn't mean giving up. Truth is, we aren't in control of a lot in life. And the areas in which we can exert self-control are often the very things we're overlooking because we're fixated on external factors and circumstances rather than looking within. It's usually not easy to identify your fears and how they're affecting your life. We're afraid of the fear, so it's a lot easier to look at it together with a compassionate witness. Fear isn't as scary when we aren't alone because the very nature of fear is the disconnection and separation. Having a trustworthy professional ally can be really helpful for breaking through fears, but even that requires the willingness to face it. Otherwise, you'll just keep trying to outrun the ghost, and no matter where you go, it will keep finding you. So how do we begin to meet fear rather than running from it? First, we have to see what it's trying to do for us. In 2020, when I was seeing what was happening in the world and recognizing the trajectory of where it was going, I found myself paralyzed by fear. That was resonant with my core wound, a fear so big I named it terror. And at the time, I didn't have anyone to turn to. My prior mentors, coaches, and healers went into the collective trance during the pandemic. I lost trust in anyone who couldn't recognize what was happening in the world. Most of my life, I felt like I was alone in the world, but that was probably the most alone I'd ever felt. Have you ever found yourself in a moment like that, where the fear felt bigger than you and there was no one you could really trust to turn to? What did you do with that? I was trying to manage and bypass that fear, yet it was too big for me to face alone. I needed help, but I didn't have any reliable helpers. So I turned to plant medicine, which serendipitously showed up exactly when I needed it, even though I wasn't looking for it. I knew I needed to let myself go fully into the depths of the fear to get to the bottom of it, but my defense mechanisms were too strong to explore that through my conscious mind. Without anyone trustworthy and skilled to guide me into those depths, the only other door was a psychedelic journey because there was no way out but through. Please understand, I'm not telling you to do this. I'm just saying it's what I needed. The mushrooms helped me to connect with my body and subconscious so I could get to the source of the fear that was incapacitating me during that heightened moment of collective fear in the world. For hours, I tossed and turned in the heavy darkness, at times contracting into fetal position when the waves of fear were too big to breathe through. There were moments that felt like an eternity in which I wasn't sure I'd survive it. All I could see, hear, taste, and touch was the overwhelming darkness of fear. I couldn't access any other emotions. It felt like I was going to get stuck like that forever. I wanted to give up, but there's no stopping a journey like that. It's the ultimate surrender of control, for at least the next 4 to 6 hours. The price of admission is you can surrender, but you can't give up until it's done with you. Once I eventually released the futility of trying to control it, releasing my grip just a little bit instead of trying to keep it down, I let the fear start to wash over me. First like a cold stream, and then like a rushing river of glacial water. I saw myself approaching the fear up close, like painting my house as I'd done that summer, getting to know every little corner of my home with my brush. Finally, I could let myself explore the dark corners of fear without as much resistance. And realizing that I wasn't going to die if I let myself feel it, that the fear of the fear was actually worse than the fear itself, I stopped fighting to maintain control because it was exhausting. It finally became easier to let go. I surrendered and my defense mechanisms dissolved in an instant. The only way out is through. Suddenly I saw my Mexican sister's face appear next to my bed. She said, "I hate that you're all alone." Something instantly shifted in my body and state when I felt her. I bursted into tears and the field bursted into light. The darkness began to transform into a color palette of emotions. I surfed the waves of sadness, joy, humor, anger, resentment, compassion, no longer feeling like the water was going to drown me. Who or what reminds you that you're not alone, even in your darkest moments? Then I started getting downloads and new insights about the fear. I shifted into a state of acceptance, a deep knowing that I couldn't control what was happening in the world, and somehow that wasn't as scary anymore. I learned that fear isn't the enemy, though the adversary often uses our fear against us. Because when fear is at the helm, instead of living from our essence, we live in the shadow of what we could be. The shadow grows bigger into the point where it feels like death to face it. It continues to sabotage everything, destroying us from within. What happens in you when you stop trying to fight the fear and just let yourself feel it, even for a moment? Can you notice where your grip might be? When we step across the threshold guarded by fear, we can finally start to discover our essence. This is where we can meet fear as a threshold, not an enemy. Fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a silent no to life's invitation, a tight chest, a half step back when we really want to take a leap. When we can feel the fear, we can choose to respond from presence instead of reacting from our programming. That's where we can identify the phantom. We can observe the moment when we want to hold back just in case, instead of doing what we're dreaming of or expressing what we want to say or create. Fear isn't always about real danger. It can also be a control signal that's trying to keep us safe from something that happened long before, even though it's not happening right now. Fear is often the alarm trying to protect the part of you that doesn't yet trust life and love. In a wild synchronicity, as I was writing this podcast, the fire alarm in my building went off. Turns out it was a false alarm. A neighbor let his air fryer smoke drift into the hallway. But I immediately sensed it was very interesting timing. Fear, terror, is my dominant core wound. It was always there in the background, though now significantly less after transmuting that wound into medicine earlier this year. The fears that become chronic fear once upon a time were legit fears imprinted on our body and consciousness. It was ancestral intelligence passed down. But eventually, it starts holding us back from what we really want. When we're willing to turn and face the fear without using control mechanisms to make ourselves feel safe, something magical happens. I was trying to connect the dots with the false alarm and what's currently happening in my life. It wasn't until the next morning that I discovered the next layer of fear that I'm uncovering. I felt some mild anxiety when I woke up, which for me is like an internal alarm system. I don't usually feel anxiety anymore, so when it comes up, I start to pay attention. Dr. Stephen Porges, the creator of the polyvagal theory, says that anxiety is a sign that the body feels unsafe. And I used to make that mean that there's an external threat, because in the past there often was, so that was my automatic programming. However, once we have solid discernment, self-worth, and self-trust, anxiety can be a sign that we're actually afraid of something really good, like love and connection. Just how good are you with good? He asked me. For many of us, what we were taught with love could have been abuse, neglect, rejection, abandonment, mental illness, spiritual warfare. We might not have a template yet of what it's like to be loved genuinely, tenderly, wholeheartedly, honorably. We may think we're afraid of not being accepted or loved, but actually, the bigger fear is to be deeply seen and loved. That's the unfamiliar and unknown. While we might experience unconditional love from our animals, and bonding with other mammals can bring a sense of neurological regulation, peace, comfort, and companionship, it's not the same as receiving true love from another human. I've had the insight for some time now that my current growing edge is opening to receive love. But that morning after the false alarm, it became real. Through an interaction the night before, when I asked to be held tightly to create a sense of safe immobilization, he turned right toward me with full presence. That never happened before. I usually didn't ask anyone for what I needed, and when I did, I wasn't usually met. But this time, I was met deeply and instantly without hesitation. Safe immobilization leads to expansion instead of collapse. So the next morning, with my heart expanding into some new space, I could feel the uncomfortable edge of my comfort zone and the jitter-filled opportunity to step beyond the threshold of fear. I learned that sometimes the question isn't what's wrong. It's where am I holding back, not because it's wrong, but because I'm afraid of what's great. Because when we're truly held for the first time, we become aware of the grief of never being held like that before. That's not the same thing as the fear of not being loved. It's the threshold that opens when love actually lands. And that often sounds like the old alarm bells, but in this case, it's a false alarm. The anxiety I felt was my body and being asking for dose and pacing as I integrate into a whole new world. Has there been a moment in your life where love truly landed and it scared you? What part of you hesitated to receive it? Stay tuned for updates on Mission Let Love Land. Would you like to know that it's possible to meet fear not as a threat, but as a threshold to everything you ever wanted and needed? There's many ways that we avoid facing the fear. Here's what might be happening when we're trying to gain a sense of safety through control. 1. Over-planning and micromanaging. There may be a belief, something like, if I plan and control everything, nothing can go wrong. What's happening here is that we're avoiding the fear of uncertainty, failure, or disappointment. But the reality is that life isn't linear. Controlling all the little details creates tension and overwhelm. 2. Perfectionism. There may be a belief, something like, if I get it all right, I won't be judged or rejected. What's happening here is that we're avoiding the fear of shame, unworthiness, or being seen. But the reality is it's never going to be perfect enough, and that pressure blocks authenticity, relatability, and vulnerability. 3. Hyper-independence. There's usually a belief like, if I do it all myself, no one can let me down. And what's happening here is that we're avoiding the fear of betrayal, disappointment, and vulnerability. But the reality is that this cuts us off from support, intimacy, love, connection, and interdependence. 4. Rigidity and routine, or needing predictability. There may be a belief like, if everything is predictable, I won't be thrown off. What's happening here is that we're avoiding the fear of chaos, change, or lack of control. But the reality is that life is inherently unpredictable, and that's actually the place from where miracles emerge. 5. Emotional suppression. There may be a belief like, if I don't feel it, it can't hurt me. And what's happening here is usually we're avoiding the fear of emotional flooding, grief, or heartbreak. But the reality is suppressed fear leaks into our behavior. It becomes illness and isolation. 6. Fixation on others' behavior. There may be a belief here like, if they act how I want, I can feel safe. But what's happening here is that we're avoiding the fear of abandonment, betrayal, or unpredictability in relationships. The reality is that attempting to control others kills the intimacy, causing resistance, conflict, and static in the relationship. 7. Spiritual bypassing. There may be a belief like, if I stay high vibe, I won't feel fear. And what's happening here is that we're avoiding the raw human emotion beneath the surface. We're trying to outrun the ghost instead of processing it. The reality here is that unfelt fear keeps pulling the strings behind the scenes, driving our behavior and experiences of life. 8. Overconsumption of information, or doom scrolling. There may be a belief behind that like, well, if I know everything, I'll be prepared for the worst. But what's happening here is that we're avoiding the fear of powerlessness, danger, or the unknown. And the reality is it heightens fear by keeping the nervous system on alert, and that can contribute to our worst fears manifesting and missing all the beauty in life. 9. Chronic busyness, or an addiction to productivity. There may be a belief here like, if I stay busy, I don't have to feel. But what's happening here is that we're avoiding the quiet space and stillness where the fear might surface. The reality is that constant doing depletes the system and disconnects us from true guidance. Control appears to create safety, but it often masks the deeper fear we haven't allowed ourselves to feel. When we can meet fear with presence instead of pressure, control dissolves and courage begins. And it is a lot easier to face the fear when we aren't alone, because fear isn't just personal, it's often ancestral, passed down like invisible code through the bloodline, making us feel separate and isolated. It's not nearly as scary when we aren't alone. Fear isn't only in our story, it's also in the lineage. It's part of our ancestral roots. Chronic fear comes from scary childhood experiences and ancestral trauma passed down as protection stances. Our ancestors lived through war, hunger, poverty, oppression, genocide, abandonment, exile, all of which contributed to a generational setting of hypervigilance. The resonance of these patterns appears in the loops we find ourselves repeating time and time again. We are the continuation of the ancestral loops from those who came before us until we develop greater awareness and transmute those wounds into medicine. We inherited cultural, religious, and familial scripts like, people are dangerous, it's safer to hide, fearing God is loving God, you can't count on anybody, act tough, no fear. We're all carrying generational survival programs that feel like protection. Are you aware of any that you inherited? Fear isn't weakness, it's an echo, and you don't have to conquer it, you only need to meet it differently. We can choose to become the generation that trusts ourselves enough to face the fear and let go of the old patterns so we can liberate ourselves and offer liberation to our lineage. What's not going to work is avoiding the fear. It's also not going to work to bypass it by looking for evidence for why you shouldn't be afraid. Those tactics are helpful in the short term, but the chronic fear will persist and grow ever bigger. We need to get to the roots of fear instead of just cutting the weeds on the surface. In theta healing, a holistic technique created by Vianna Stibel, we dig into fears with the question, what's the worst thing about, and then we name the thing the person's afraid of. And we keep asking that question, unfolding layers and layers of the story. And when the scaffolding of fear is revealed, we can get to the bottom belief holding the whole structure up. Once we discover the origin of the fear, we can reprogram the belief, do some energetic clearing, and bring in some new downloads from the creator. That leads to a tremendous amount of lightening, expansion, and a whole new perspective of self and life. By surrendering the illusion of control, softening the grip of hyper self-reliance, and allowing the creator of all that is to step in, we open the field to miracles, synchronicities, quantum shifts, and true courage. That's the turning point where fear dissolves and alignment begins. That's the access point to remembrance, release, reclamation, and restoration. Would you like to know that it's possible to shift from controlling to co-creating with life, and that this co-creation is your birthright? So let's take a moment now to bring this home into the body, into the field, into your breath. And this isn't about fixing the fear, it's about meeting it. I want to invite you to explore where fear lives in your body. This is an opportunity to start to face the fear just a little more each day. There's no rush, and this isn't about fixing yourself. It's about becoming more present so your body can learn that presence is stronger than control. Then you can automatically upshift into more coherence. So taking a slow, deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth, allowing your awareness to settle down in your body in the same way your body is settling into the chair. And with each breath, allowing your awareness to settle deeper and deeper into your body. Where does the fear live in your body? What does it feel like? Do you notice any sensations, And without trying to fix it, just sitting with it, as you would with a child who's been crying quietly in the corner and needs you to sit with her so you could look at the fear together. When do you most notice those sensations and feelings? And how do you respond or react? What are you afraid will happen if you let yourself open just a little more? And what would happen if you knew that you would be seen and met? How would your life be different? How would you be different? Let yourself take in the possibility of new possibilities for a moment. Would you like to know that it's possible to meet fear, not as a threat, but as a threshold? That's the beginning of a new relationship with fear, one rooted in trust, not force, curiosity, not control. Fear was never the enemy. It was simply the echo of a place within that hadn't been held in the right tone yet. It's not the darkness itself that wounds us, but the absence of a witness and connection when we're within it. At the core of the fear is a deep sense of loneliness, disconnection, and separation. Fighting the darkness makes it stronger. Trying to control it or keep it at bay leads to more resistance, tension, and pain. You don't need to fight and wrestle the ghost. You only need to stay and reclaim your coherence. To breathe into the fear with presence without abandoning yourself when it gets scary. The shaking that happens when we face fear isn't a weakness. It's the body remembering how to trust life and ourselves again. Because what looks like danger is sometimes just the soul reminding you that you're ready to feel more alive. And in that moment, the trembling becomes an ecstatic dance, divinely orchestrated in flow with the breath and symphony of life that you've always been part of, even if you forgot at times. The surrender into the dance becomes your new home of limitless possibilities. So as we close this journey through fear, I invite you to take a few moments today, just for you, to notice where fear has been driving and where you're ready to release the grip of control. Let yourself exhale into that space of presence. Let life begin to meet you there. And as you feel that opening, stay close, because in the next episode, we'll step into the tender terrain of shame, the echo of unworthiness. We'll explore the question, what part of me have I decided is unlovable? It's time to reclaim that lost piece and remember that you are worthy of love. And I'll meet you there. If this message speaks to your soul, make sure to subscribe or follow wherever you listen to podcasts. Share this with someone else on the path, someone who's ready to go deeper, beyond the surface of healing and into true integration, beyond the personal and into the ancestral, collective, and planetary layers too. And if you'd like to leave a message or a note for me, something that resonated, something you want to hear more about, you can leave a comment here, or you'll find a link in the show notes where you can send me a private message. And if you'd like to work privately with me, you'll find the link for one-on-ones in the show notes or on my website, innerintegration.com. I'd love to help you connect with these themes in your own life so you can transmute them for yourself and your own lineage, creating a positive impact in your life and the world around you. I also have an epic 3-month transformational journey called Becoming You, for those who want a guide to walk with you into your own inner alchemy of wounds into wisdom, embodying your purpose, and leading with light. Remember, keep listening within. No more playing small. It's time to remember who you are. The world needs your wholeness now more than ever. You are not the wound. You are the medicine. Let your trauma become your map to purpose. Thank you for joining me today for this transmission of the Inner Integration Podcast. You're not broken. You're not behind. Your trauma wasn't a detour. It was initiation, an immersion into the very wisdom your soul came here to embody. To go deeper into this work, visit innerintegration.com. And until next time, big hug to you.